Hi everyone, yasas, que kalos tirthata to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making lamb kleftiko. It's basically lamb with veggies in one pan, wrapped in parchment paper and cooked low and slow in the oven. You just put everything all together, like I said, in one pan. This is a beautiful, rustic, family-style meal that everyone is going to love. You could, of course, make this all year round, but it is nice if you're looking for a Easter recipe to make or main course to serve at your spring dinner. This is so simple to put together and so delicious. Let's get started. We're going to begin with the lamb. So I'm using a boneless leg of lamb. You can use bone-in leg of lamb. You can use shoulder with the bone or without the bone. Lamb shanks work really well with this. You're going to need 4 to 5 pounds of lamb meat, whichever one you're using. And I like to trim the excess fat off since I'm not searing it. If you like the flavor that the fat leaves, by all means leave it on. We're going to get rid of as much of the fat as possible and then cut it into large sized chunks just like this. I don't like the smaller pieces because they kind of melt, and I like for the lamb to kind of hold its shape, even though you can shred it later on, but it's up to you. So the lamb is good to go. We're going to prepare our veggies now. So I have 2 potatoes here. You can use russet potatoes or gold potatoes. You can add more potatoes if you like. By all means, you can fit up to 4 potatoes in the tray. Peel them and then cut them into either wedges or into bigger chunks just like this. This is a very rustic dish, so everything is in large pieces. I'm also going to cut up this onion, just peel it and then dice it up into either big chunks. If you want to finely chop it, you can do that too, because some people don't like the texture that big chunks of onion leave in there unless they're grilled, and I totally understand that. 2 bell peppers, these are also going to get chopped up. We're also going to prepare the marinade for this, so a 1/4 cup of olive oil, the juice of 3 lemons. I like it really lemony because it cuts the gaminess of lamb and it also freshens it up really nicely. I have 2 garlic cloves that are grated in here, and I'll also add about 1/3 to 1/2 cup of water. Whisk that all together and set it aside, and now we're going to arrange everything into our pan. So I have a 9 by 13 inch baking pan over here and 2 very large sheets of parchment paper. These are full sheet parchment paper and they're perfect for this. Just overlap them just so that way the whole tray is covered with the parchment, and you could crumble the parchment paper up first so that way it stays in the pan more easily. We're going to put the veggies in there. I'll also add a really nice handful of garlic cloves. These are peeled garlic cloves. You can chop them up if you like, but I like them whole because they add a little bit of sweetness when they roast in the oven. And then I'll also season these with a little bit of olive oil, salt, freshly cracked black pepper, and a hefty spoon of dried oregano. Toss everything up, then place the lamb on top, and we'll season it with some salt. I'll also add 2 sprigs of rosemary in here. This is fresh rosemary. 2 tablespoons of dried oregano. Oregano and lamb go together so well. Some crushed red pepper flakes if you like the heat. 1 teaspoon of ground cumin powder. 1 teaspoon of ground coriander. Freshly cracked black pepper. And if you want to, you can make it a little bit even more flavorful by adding 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon to this. It's totally up to you. Now we're going to crumble the feta cheese on top. Instead of feta, you can also use kefalotiri or kefalograviera. You can just cut them up into cubes and throw them in here. But I'm using about 6 to 8 ounces of sheep's milk feta that I'm just going to crumble in. Then I'll fold the parchment paper over the whole mixture just so that way everything is covered really well. And then I'm going to cover the pan with a sheet of aluminum foil. The oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. This is going to bake low and slow on the middle rack for 4.5 hours. The meat will be tender and just falling apart. All the veggies will be nice and soft when they come out of the oven. The potatoes will be perfectly cooked. You can mash them with a fork. That's how you know it's ready. There'll still be some sauce in there, so you can dip bread into that or spoon it over rice, however you want to serve it. This is so delicious and it's ready to serve. And just like that, the lamb is ready. It's so tender and soft. There's a lot of sauce in there, but as it sits and cools, the sauce is gonna get soaked up by the potatoes and it's gonna dry up just a little bit. I did not add too much oil to this dish because lamb does tend to be fatty, and even though I cleaned it off really well in the beginning and I just trimmed off as much of the fat as possible, it is still a fatty cut of meat. I used leg of lamb today. Shoulder would be delicious in this because it is a little bit softer, especially when you cook it nice and slow in the oven like we did today. It took 4.5 hours for this to be ready. The potatoes are fully cooked. You can just mash them with a fork. The garlic cloves, I didn't chop them up. You can if you want to, but you can just mash those up. This is perfect served over like a Mediterranean rice pilaf, but it's so delicious for making sandwiches. So the next day or the day after that, if you're making extra, you can shred up the lamb and just soak it in that sauce and stuff pita with it. Put some tzatziki in there and you'll have just a lunch or dinner that is going to be so delicious. You're all going to love that for sure. So it's perfect for meal prep or for a dinner party. It's so easy. If you're not a huge fan of the big chunky veggies, I totally understand. You can finely chop the onions and just put them in there in the beginning so that way they're really small. Later on, I know some people don't like chunks of onion and chunks of bell pepper in their food. If you want to leave the bell pepper out, that's fine. And if you wanted to add a little bit more spice, you can throw some hot chilies in there. This is so good. And then one more thing with the feta cheese. I put the feta cheese in right at the beginning and it baked and it left its flavor in there and melted in a little bit. But if you want to put it in at the very end so that way it retains a little bit of its shape, you can do that. Just the last 15 minutes of roasting. You can put the feta in there, even uncover the parchment, remove the foil, and let it roast for about 15 minutes just so that way you can get some beautiful color. And just like that, dinner is going to be on the table. It does take a long time to cook in the oven, but the prep work is so easy. It's just about 15 minutes of prep work. You throw everything all together and then you forget about it, let the oven do all the work. Let's do the taste test. So of course I warmed up some pita bread and I like to soak that pita in the sauce because that sauce has so much flavor. The potatoes just mash easily with a fork. That's how I like to eat them. And look at the lamb, it's just falling apart. So good. So lemony, just the way I like it. I juiced 3 lemons in here because I like my lemony dishes, really lemony. Lemon tenderizes the lamb even more, gets rid of that gaminess, and it also brightens it up a bunch. So I hope you guys give this recipe a try. You can head on over to the website, dimitrasdishes.com, to print this out. If you want to learn how to make homemade pita bread to serve with this, click over here and I'll see you right over there. Yes, us.